Well, hello everyone. Ogre27 Kane here today, and we're going to do a review of The Last Faith for Nintendo Switch. Let's do a brief overview and figure out what this game's all about. So from what I understand, this game was a Kickstarter that was created by Kumi Souls Games. This game is a Metroidvania with really beautiful art and aesthetic, very similar to Castlevania, and a ton of Dark Souls mechanics and lore. The game has its own secrets, and it really pushes you to dig in and find everything, but there are some caveats. So let's start with the gameplay. So the gameplay in this is very similar to its namesakes, both Castlevania and Dark Souls. While having the Castlevania exploration and art and aesthetic and feel to it, it has a lot of the Dark Souls mechanics such as combat and movement. It also features a lot of the lore hidden very well, just like Dark Souls does as well. Now, the gameplay itself is very fast-paced and frenetic, and you don't have a stamina meter. You do have a certain cooldown with your dodge roll, and each weapon has its own speed that you need to utilize. But there are some differences which differentiate it. On top of that, the artwork is one of a kind, and although it looks kind of drab throughout the whole thing, it's hard to not notice the extreme level of detail that they put into this game. So another feature I have to mention is that this game has a very sizable map, and it's a blast. And if you rush through it, you can beat it in 15 to 20 hours, but if you want, you can go and get lost for another 20, 30, 40 hours just finding weapons and upgrading them. The cool thing about the weapons in this is not only do they have upgrade paths up to level 10, but they also have special attacks that come with each one. There's a lot of uniqueness to this game and a lot of well-hidden aspects to it. There's a lot to explore, and I'll be honest, I'm not an expert on it. I finished it once to give this review, and I'm gonna go back and play more. So let's hit the story. So the story in this game sees your character essentially get dropped off in a world where you start out fighting a boss and trying to figure out exactly what's going on. It's very similar to Dark Souls in this aspect, as it does not give the player hardly any information. All you know is that you have a curse, and you need to find this guy that thinks he's a god. He's cursed everybody else and turned them into these power-hungry, demonic-like beasts that you have to fight through. Your quest essentially revolves around finding this guy and killing him, but in the process, you'll run across a few twists and turns which really make the journey interesting. A lot of the characters in this game have very well-written dialogue, and they're all voiced over fantastically, so you really feel the effort that was put into them. The game wants you to not know anything for a long period of time, and when it does finally start to click, it's going to be because you put pieces together in the world. I like this aspect to it, but it does fully revolve around you putting yourself into the story. So let's do combat now. So the combat in this game is definitely one of the highlights to it, but it does have its caveats. Each weapon has its own fighting style, its own speed, and its own special attack to it. How you utilize that completely depends on you. But I will give you a heads up right now. This game is very user-friendly to the strength build and the strength weapons. Your combat will be a lot more fun and a lot more engaging the first time you play this game through, because the strength weapons are really almost the beginner level. They allow you enough ability to attack and damage bosses without a bunch of crazy maneuvers and manipulations, whereas the dexterity builds and the magic builds really require you to have a lot of knowledge of what you're doing. A dex build won't do much damage for a long time in this game, and you really have to build everything else around it. There's a lot of mixture too. You have a firearm, which is your mind, you have your spells, which is your magic abilities basically, and then you have your dexterity and strength weapons. All of these pieces fit together fantastically, but there's a lot of depth to this combat and a lot of difficulty to it as well. The game is not really very good at explaining a lot of this stuff to you, so I highly recommend you dig in and try to figure it out. Let's do controls and audio now. So let's talk controls. And at first, I was really hating the control scheme in this game because I didn't know I could change it. Once I figured this out though, it completely changed it and made the game a lot more fun. I highly recommend going into the options right when you start the game and setting it up to be what you know in these style of games. You can make it like Castlevania or Dark Souls, or put a mix of both. All that matters though is that you need to figure out the right control scheme at the beginning for you, or you will struggle with this game because the default controls really suck. Let's talk about the audio. The audio in this game is great, and all the voiceovers are fantastically well done. There's not really a lot of reading if you don't want to, and the soundtrack is great too. It's a very dark and gothic and depressing, foreboding, evil type soundtrack, but it fits everything perfectly.
Stay away from me! Please, no. Keep back. I can't. I know your soul.
Graphics and animations are up now, and this category is both the highest and lowest point to this game. While the artwork and aesthetic and everything they're going for is absolutely stunning and gorgeous, and the level of detail and the size of this world is phenomenal, especially how small the studio is, I do have to mention this game has some serious performance issues. In one area in specific, the Frost area, the game will have massive frame rate stutters all over the place, and it almost got to a point where I couldn't get through the area. On top of that, the game has a lot of random crashes. It crashed 5 times in my first playthrough, and one of them was after what I considered the most difficult boss for me in the game. I struggled on this boss for well over 2 hours in multiple playthroughs over and over and over until I finally beat this boss, only to have it crash on me and not save after beating it. This is a bit annoying, and this is something they need to fix, especially given how awesome this game is. I was highly disappointed that the game doesn't save after the bosses, and you have to manually make it back to a save. This is kinda like Castlevania, but given how many of the mechanics are Dark Souls-esque, this is what I expected. Now, this out of the way, the animation quality and everything else you're going to run into this game is top notch, and when the game is running right, it looks absolutely amazing. And the combat is very fluid and doesn't really get held back in any of these areas. But this is undoubtedly the largest issue with this game, so let's do conclusion now. So in conclusion, this game is a must-buy. It was around $35 for the physical copy, and if you love Metroidvanias or Dark Souls, you will love this game. This game has a ton of replay value and a lot of fun aesthetics to it. It's highly disappointing that the game is so broken still, and I really hope they fix it soon, but I'm not necessarily holding my breath for too much more. This game was definitely a one-of-a-kind adventure, and I really enjoyed everything about it. So it's going to be a hard recommend. If performance is a big issue for you, you may want to hold off. If you want to get this game before it goes up in price, because it's probably not going to be a huge print run, then get it now and just hope they update it. That out of the way, the combat, the world exploration, the artwork, the sound, the controls, surprisingly enough, are all top notch, and I loved every aspect of this. I will be putting a lot more time into it, and I will probably do several more playthroughs. There's a lot I haven't discovered, and there's a lot of fun to this game. The last thing I need to mention is that there are multiple endings, and if you want to get the true one, I recommend digging in and figuring out what all you gotta do. It's one of those games that hides a lot of nuance to you, and if you really want to find it, you might have to take multiple playthroughs. But that's not that big a deal to me. Thank you for watching today's video. It was a blast to make. I upload every single Monday. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day. This is Ogre27 Kane, signing out.